Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Ekayani and this is this week's edition of The Living Connection, The Living Connection with Ekayani. And this week I decided to do another book review. There's a lot of good books out there that can really help empower you to finding your way back to health or living a healthier lifestyle if you're already on that path. And this week's book is called Wheat Belly. It's by Dr. William Davis, who's a cardiologist, and the subtitle of this book is called Lose the Wheat, Lose the Weight, and Find Your Path Back to Health. It's a #1 New York Times bestseller, and it's not for no reason, in my opinion. So it's about 266 pages long. There is also an appendix B towards the back of the book, where he also gives some recipes and some eating guidelines for people that are suffering from wheat, gluten intolerance in general, which can also be from other sources other than wheat, although wheat in the United States is the main culprit, and celiac sufferers. This is a huge problem, as you know, because currently in this country we have close to 26 million people with diabetes. We have a staggering 79 million people that are pre-diabetic. That includes children, and it is the #1 burden on the healthcare industry in this country. In this book, he covers a lot of different things. It's very dense in information. He talks about celiac disease. He talks about the relationship between leaky gut and celiac. He talks about dementia. He talks about ataxia. He talks about neuropathy. He talks about kidney disease. He talks about cataracts and a whole lot more. And it's all the relationships to gluten intolerance, wheat intolerance, but even touches upon, rye, barley, etc. One of the first points that he makes is that the wheat that we're eating today is not the wheat that the Egyptians were eating. It's not the wheat that our grandparents were eating. It's not the wheat that we were even eating 50 years ago in this country. So he goes into some detail about the history of wheat, its modifications, its hybridization, its genetic modification, and the effect that it has on the human being. So that's quite interesting, the historical background that he gives on it. He also has a very interesting chapter where he talks about different kinds of testing that can be done. How do you know if you're a celiac sufferer? How do you know if you're gluten intolerant? It turns out that unless you have a practitioner, a medical practitioner, who's extremely savvy and knows some of the signs and symptoms to look for that may appear to be other things, you could be suffering with gluten intolerance and celiac intolerance literally for decades. So on page 80, he goes into something that he calls Name That Antibody. So there's a couple of different blood tests that you can take which have an 80 to 90% accuracy on identifying whether or not indeed this is a problem for you. So I thought that was extremely helpful. He also mentions some genetic markers. Let's see. He really makes a strong case for the excessive consumption of gluten products. Something like people are counseled to, and by the American Diabetes Association, to consume, quote, healthy whole grains or healthy heart foods to the tune of 6 to 11 servings per day. So in his own case, for example, he suffered or struggled and also suffered with excess weight. He exercised, he ran, he did all the right things, but he simply could not lose the weight. And he found that when he decided to cut wheat from his diet, and all the other things that wheat finds its way into. That's another wonderful thing that he points out as kind of the insidious nature of wheat. And there goes the bell. That he dropped, I think in his own case, if I remember correctly, he dropped about 30, 40 pounds and in a very short amount of time, just by making this simple yet profound lifestyle change. The other things that he mentions, if you can identify with any of these, or you have a loved one who can identify with any of these, aching joints, also seizures, migraine headaches. There's also, he spends a considerable amount of time talking about the effect that gluten has on the human nervous system. So he talks about the effect that it has on the brain, the cerebellum. He talks about the effect that it has on the cerebral cortex. He talks about such things as neuropathy. How is it that you are able, or a person is able to lose feeling, sensation in their legs? Or perhaps they have an inability to feel in one side of the body or in one arm. How is it that a diabetic is actually able to step on a thumbtack and not feel anything? There is something also called ataxia. What about cataracts? Loss of vision. So he really is quite thorough. This book is very dense in information. It's only about 266 pages long, but don't be fooled by that. I also appreciated the depth that he went into making the relationship between the glycemic index and weight gain, the effect that it has on mood, the effect that it has on energy. So this is a great book. It goes into some more detail. It gets a little geeky on you, but is still understandable for the lay person to understand how this food, which really can have a drug-like effect, an opiate-like effect, an allergic effect, a toxic effect on so many, many, many people in so many ways, how so many things can be alleviated just by making a simple and profound lifestyle change by cutting gluten out of your diet and, in all its forms and the companion foods that it finds itself in. So if you've been struggling with weight, or if you've been struggling with some of the symptoms that I mentioned, too numerous to mention here, and your curiosity has been piqued, I highly recommend that you pick up a copy of Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis, MD, specializing in cardiology. This is Ekayani. Join the discussion. Like my channel, like my page on Facebook, The Living Connection with Ekayani Chamberlain. I'll see you next time, and take control of your health, take control of your life, become educated, and have a very happy and, most importantly, healthy 2014. Bye-bye now. Till next time.